Captain Ed Mitchell, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon. And he asked me, what made you start this operation called Remote Area Medical? And I said, well, it goes back to way back in the middle of the last century, 1950. And I was a young cowboy on a vast cattle operation where all the cowboys were Indians down there on the border of Brazil. And they gave me a wild horse to ride, a horse called Kang. Kang was a Wapishana Indian name that meant the devil. And Kang had already killed 2 other cowboys. And so I was sort of the next one in line. And so we lassoed Kang in the corral and tied him up to a post and put on our rudimentary saddle. In fact, some of you may have an opportunity to see that very same saddle, which is in my little office in the front of the building here. And I climbed on board, pulled off the blindfold, and Kang went bucking across the savannah and had a head-on collision with the side of the corral. And I was very badly injured. And the cowboys, who were all Indians, pulled me out from underneath the horse, and one of them said, well, the nearest doctor is 26 days on foot from here through that narrow trail through the rainforest where you couldn't take horses. And when I told astronaut Ed Mitchell that story, he said, gosh, he said, I was on the moon and I was only 3 days from the nearest doctor. And I said, well, Captain Mitchell, you know, for the people that lived in that neck of the woods, and indeed, many, many people who live right here in the United States that don't have access to health care, they might as well be on the moon for the opportunity that they have to get the care they need. And so that was sort of the what prompted me, that sort of kick in the head by a wild horse that said to me, maybe we ought to bring these doctors a little bit closer. And we've done that. And a number of my colleagues here, like Dr. Paul Whitkey here, have actually been back to that same place where I got that kick in the head by that horse. And years later, I was sort of brought up here to this country, had never been to the United States before. In fact, I was so out of touch with what was going on in the rest of the world that I remember making a donation of 50 cents to the Black Panthers because I thought it was to help preserve an endangered species. So, when was it? 1985, wasn't it? Yeah, 1985. That's when we got the certificate, tax exemption, 501c3, all that stuff, to form this organization here in the United States. And now, thanks to 84,000 volunteers and a large number of volunteers right here underneath this tent who've made this possible, we've seen way over 500,000 patients. We've done 726 of these special expeditions, as we call them. It's something like 80 million dollars worth of 80 million US dollars worth of healthcare. But we are supremely grateful to Knox County, who donated the building down there at Beach Street, where we were housed for something like 20 years, at $1 a year rent. And it really sort of saved this organization. That and the 84,000 volunteers that we've had that make all this possible, and things like 60 Minutes that came along in 2008 and did a bit of a feature about what we do that brought this to the attention of the American public, and a few dollars started to come in as a result. But that 20 years that we were there at the Giffin School, elementary school on Beach Street, really sort of saved this organization. And so we're extremely grateful to Knox County for having made that possible. And now we're happy to be here in Rockford in this magnificent facility of 55,000 square feet, which enables us to bring all of the equipment inside the buildings instead of deteriorating outdoors. And so we're now looking forward to another 20 years of service. I'm hoping that we can work ourselves out of a job here in the United States so that we can concentrate on places that were originally the purpose of this organization. Places like the Amazon and of course Haiti, which now has another big catastrophe on its hands with this viral disease that is affecting thousands of people down there. And not have to worry about the folks here in the United States, but that unfortunately seems to be quite a long time in the future. In closing, I'd like to welcome all of you this Saturday at the 70th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. That historic day, probably the most important day in the history of the modern world. And I know that we've got some veterans here today with us, and a few remaining veterans of that era. I remember standing on the cliffs in southern England the day before D-Day, watching the preparations for the greatest invasion of all time. And lest we forget that that is why we have the opportunity to be here today in a country free. And so please, those of you that can, bring your families and friends and any veterans that you know on Saturday morning of this week to the downtown Island Airport. The service starts at 10 a.m. We have a wonderful symphony orchestra of 80 pieces strong that are going to be playing wonderful music there starting at 10 a.m. And then we have a full-dressed bagpipe band that's going to come marching into the hangar at the downtown Island Airport. And then we'll have a very, very nice service, and then there'll be a flyover of vintage aircraft at the close of the service. So please come and try and be with us again this Saturday. Thank you very much for coming, and I enjoyed having all of you here today. Thank you.